This morning, shockwaves rippled across the globe as Israel's most secretive intelligence hub, the headquarters of Mossad, was hit in a devastating early morning bombing. The attack, which tore through what many considered the impenetrable heart of Israel's security apparatus, has already been described as one of the most daring strikes in recent memory. And in a twist that has set the world on edge, reports suggest that Iran, backed by none other than Russia, carried out the assault. The world is now asking, has a new alliance been forged that could rewrite the balance of power in the Middle East? Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Please subscribe and like my videos. The timeline of this attack begins just before sunrise. Residents in Tel Aviv awoke to the sounds of sirens and distant explosions. Within minutes, thick plumes of smoke were seen rising from the direction of Mossad's heavily guarded compound. For decades, Mossad has been regarded as the spear tip of Israel's intelligence network, responsible for counterterrorism, espionage, and global operations. To see it attacked so directly was not just a blow to Israeli security, but a psychological shock to the nation and the world. Iranian state media wasted no time claiming responsibility. Their broadcasts declared this attack as retaliation for years of Israeli covert operations and assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists. But what startled analysts even more was the narrative that Russia, a global military powerhouse, had coordinated with Iran in executing this operation. If true, this is more than just another chapter in the ongoing Iran-Israel shadow war. It represents the entrance of a great power onto the battlefield, one that could escalate the conflict to unprecedented levels. Why would Russia do this? For years, Moscow has maintained a delicate balance in the Middle East. On one hand, it has ties with Israel, especially in matters of coordination over Syria. On the other, it has deepened its partnership with Iran, driven by arms deals, oil trade, and mutual opposition to Western influence. Analysts suggest that Russia's decision to side openly with Iran signals its frustration with Western policies in Ukraine, NATO's continued support for Israel, and a larger strategy to challenge U.S. dominance globally. Inside Israel, panic and fury are colliding. The Israeli government insists it is investigating the full scale of the attack, but the symbolism alone has rattled the country. Mossad is not just another building. It represents the nerve center of Israel's intelligence reach, feared and respected across the world. An attack on such a site sends a chilling message. If Mossad can be struck, no target is off limits. As the morning unfolded, Israeli emergency services rushed to the scene. Security cordons were established, ambulances moved in and out, and the air was thick with confusion. Eyewitnesses described a fiery blast that lit up the early sky, followed by secondary explosions inside the compound. Questions immediately arose. How did the attackers bypass Israel's layered air defense? Was there an intelligence failure? And if Russia truly played a role, did advanced weaponry overwhelm Israel's vaunted Iron Dome and other systems? Iran, for its part, celebrated the strike as a warning shot. Officials declared that the operation was a direct response to Israeli actions not just inside Iran, but across the region, from Syria to Lebanon, from Gaza to covert operations in Tehran. Iran's leaders framed it as proof that Israel's intelligence services, long seen as untouchable, were vulnerable. They also issued a chilling warning: this was only the beginning, but the mention of Russia is what has elevated this story from regional to global significance. Russian state outlets framed the event not as an aggression, but as a strategic balancing act against what they describe as Israel's unchecked aggression, often carried out under the umbrella of U.S. protection. Some sources in Moscow portrayed the strike as a joint operation, with Russian advisors allegedly assisting Iran in targeting Mossad's coordinates. If substantiated, this means that Moscow has crossed a red line, moving from political alignment with Tehran into active military cooperation. Around the world, governments reacted with alarm. Washington called the incident a dangerous escalation and reaffirmed its commitment to Israel's security. European capitals echoed similar sentiments, warning that a Russia Iran alliance in active combat could destabilize not just the Middle East, but global security itself. In the Arab world, responses were mixed. Some populations celebrated the humiliation of Mossad, while their governments called for calm, knowing full well that a wider war could devastate the region. Markets reacted almost instantly. Oil prices surged on fears of disruption in the Persian Gulf. Stock markets in Asia and Europe dipped, reflecting investor anxiety. Airlines diverted flights away from Israeli airspace, and tourism already battered ground to a halt. For ordinary Israelis, the morning attack was not just a headline. It was a lived trauma that upended daily life. Inside Israel's military command, heated debates erupted. Should Israel retaliate immediately, risking a direct confrontation with both Iran and Russia? Or should it gather intelligence, build international support, and plan a calculated response? Prime ministerial advisors weighed the costs of restraint versus the risks of escalation. For a nation that prides itself on swift, decisive action, hesitation itself was a shocking change of pace. Meanwhile, Iran's leadership celebrated the operation as a symbol of its growing regional influence. Officials declared that Israel could no longer act with impunity, and that the resistance axis from Hezbollah in Lebanon to militias in Iraq and Syria stood ready to strike in coordination. Iran painted the picture of a new era, one in which Israel faces not isolated flare-ups, but a unified front backed by major powers. Russia's motives run deeper than immediate geopolitics. For Moscow, aligning with Iran offers leverage against the West. By participating, or even being perceived as participating, in such a high-profile strike, Russia diverts global attention from Ukraine, tests U.S. red lines, and demonstrates that it can disrupt Western allies anywhere in the world. For the Kremlin, this is about proving relevance and power projection in multiple theaters simultaneously. Inside the Mossad compound, details remain scarce. Some sources speak of heavy structural damage, others suggest the blast targeted underground levels where operations are coordinated. There are whispers of casualties among senior operatives, though Israel has not confirmed this. What is clear is that the image of invulnerability surrounding Mossad has been punctured. Even if Israel downplays the extent of the damage, the psychological victory for Iran, and potentially Russia, is undeniable. As the day wore on, Israel's allies issued statements of solidarity. U.S. aircraft carriers were reportedly repositioned in the Mediterranean as a show of force. European Union officials called for emergency meetings to discuss sanctions on Iran and potentially Russia. The United Nations prepared for a heated Security Council session where vetoes and divisions were certain to paralyze any meaningful resolution. On the streets of Tehran, jubilant crowds celebrated the strike, waving flags and chanting slogans. State television replayed graphics of missiles striking targets, framing the attack as divine justice. In Moscow, the reaction was more muted but calculated. Russian officials spoke of defensive actions and accused Israel of long-standing provocations. The narrative was carefully crafted to project strength without inviting immediate NATO confrontation. In Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, however, the mood was grim. Citizens lined up at supermarkets, fearing a broader war. Shelters were reopened and stocked. The sense of safety, already eroded by months of conflict, seemed to evaporate entirely with the idea that even Mossad's heart could be struck. Parents pulled children from schools, workplaces shut down, and highways jammed with panicked drivers trying to leave the city. The longer-term implications are staggering. If this attack is indeed a joint Iran-Russia operation, it sets a precedent that could embolden other nations to challenge Western allies through unconventional coalitions. It also forces Israel to rethink its security doctrine. No longer is the threat only from neighboring states or non-state actors. Now great powers could be stepping directly into the fight. For Washington and NATO, the attack demands a reassessment of commitments and strategies, not just in the Middle East but globally. Strategically, the bombing sends several messages. To Israel, your intelligence crown jewel is not beyond reach. To the United States, your ally is vulnerable and your enemies are coordinating. To the wider world, Power dynamics are shifting, and those once seen as regional players are now operating on a global stage. Whether these messages are exaggerated propaganda or concrete reality, the perception alone reshapes the conflict. As night fell after the attack, Israelis braced for more sirens. Rumors swirled of further strikes, of Hezbollah preparing assaults from the north, of cyberattacks targeting critical infrastructure. The sense of uncertainty was palpable, like a nation standing at the edge of a precipice waiting for the next push. For Iran and Russia, this uncertainty is a weapon as powerful as any missile. For Israel, it is a nightmare scenario. The future of this conflict now hangs on the decisions made in the coming hours and days. Will Israel retaliate with overwhelming force, risking a clash with two powerful adversaries? Will diplomatic backchannels diffuse tensions before they spiral into world war? Or will this morning's attack be remembered as the spark that ignited an inferno stretching far beyond the Middle East? For now, what is certain is this: the bombing of Mossad's headquarters has shattered illusions of security, redrawn geopolitical lines, and signaled the emergence of an alliance that could challenge the very foundations of the current world order. The eyes of the globe are fixed on Tel Aviv, Tehran, and Moscow, and everyone is asking the same question: what happens next? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned as we continue to follow this rapidly unfolding story.